Welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, where we celebrate those who defy fear, embrace growth, and live without regret. We rarely hear about the challenges, fears, and crossroads that successful leaders grapple with across work and life. Uncomfortable Growth Uncut shines a light on their personal story and the critical human skills we all need today to turn ongoing tough trials into triumph. In this episode, we explore uncomfortable growth with Ellesha Kirby, who was made redundant from her role as Global President at Kenvue after multiple promotions and 16 years with the company. Discover how she navigated this career transition by embracing corporate detox, exploring her priorities, and uncovering new opportunities. A must listen for anyone facing a challenging career crossroad. So I'm here today on Uncomfortable Growth Uncut with the amazing Ellesha Kirby. So Ellesha and I have been friends for decades, literally decades, since we both first started working. And she's had an incredible career, still going strong. She recently was in the global president role of heading up skin health and beauty segment at Kenvue, which was previously J&J Consumer. And like I said, she's one of the most incredible people I know. So I'm so thrilled to have her on Uncomfortable Growth Uncut. So welcome, Ellesha.
Hey, Ro, great to be here. I'm on my podcast debut, and I couldn't do it with a better co-person, leader.
So there's a lot going on in your life at the moment, but I'm just going to kind of ask my normal question, which is, what's an uncomfortable growth story that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, so Rowie, I thought today, knowing that we're talking about uncomfortable growth, I would talk about my current uncomfortable growth story, which I'm sure a lot of people out there can relate to. It's to do with career transitions and job transitions. A couple of months ago, there was a decision to move the role that I'm in, where I currently live in Singapore and lead my global role from Asia, to move the role back to the US. Now, I've got kids in high school and I've done my US stint, about 10 years ago. So I'm here committed to Singapore. So big uncomfortable growth coming out of 16 years at J&J Kenvue, and then moving into the next chapter. So it's been a fascinating journey in the last 3 months to really navigate my transition into the next chapter of my career. And, I thought that could be a really fun topic to talk about, because I know we often go into transitions often with a lot of fear, and it's just been so interesting to experience and see my own journey over the last couple of months, and the wisdom that I've gathered through that process, and maybe talk about that a bit today. I think it's very relevant to the whole uncomfortable growth moment.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. And the thing I always find fascinating as well is you never know exactly how you're going to react until you're in a situation, right? So you just don't know. Like, you think you know how you will react, but you don't always react in the way you even thought you would. And I think that's what's so fascinating about what you just said, like even observing how it's unfolded for you and what your response has been, and you're still navigating through that. So I think this is a great topic to talk about. So it's all quite fast and recent. So it was, only a few months ago that you reached out to me and told me what was happening. But let's start with maybe how you were feeling about that when you were first in those conversations with Kenvue, because obviously 16 years is a really long time. And, you're incredible in the role that you're doing, but a decision was made to move it back to the US. And yeah, so tell me what was going on with you through those initial discussions.
Yeah, and I think to contextualize it too, the last time I had a transition, and this is going to age me a little, was when I had my first son, who is nearly 19, just graduated high school last week. So huge milestone for our family. And that was the last time I transitioned, which is that I actually was at J&J earlier, where you and I worked together, and then I was here working in Asia and had my son, and then left the company for a few years, thinking I would be a great stay-at-home mum. I got that a little bit wrong because I had two different part-time jobs after about a month into that, so that I was able to, spend lots of time with him, but also have ways to, energize my mind. So it's been so interesting, this period of transition, reflecting on the last period of transition, right? And being able to witness the change. And I think that's very primary when I think about where I was in that moment, where I got the call, right? Everyone dreads the call that says something's changing on your role. And last time when I transitioned, as I said, nearly 19 years ago, I felt a lot of fear at that time. I was much earlier in my career. And I guess that's what motivated me to go get a part-time job. And I was doing fabulous things, consulting, working in a startup, just fantastic experiences. But I did feel a lot of fear. So it's interesting that in my experience this time, it really has been the opposite. And I guess I've learned so much from that first transition to know that I can approach it in a very different way. And also, I think in this one, understanding the bigger business context, where it really wasn't personal about me, right? And we're having some business challenges which are pretty well known, and there really was a need for my job to be in the US, and there was honestly a need to have a fresh face. I've been there for 16 years. So there's moments in business where I think the thing that really helped me was being able to say, hey, this is good. This is good. This is good for everybody. This is good for me. This is good for Kenvue. I love Kenvue. I'm the biggest cheerleader for those beautiful brands and people. And so it was interesting that when I got the call, of course, in that moment, I was a bit shocked, as everybody is, a bit shocked. And I did feel a great deal of empathy for the person delivering the news, because it's never easy when you're on the other side of that.
Yeah.
But immediately after, I did feel a strong sense of relief, honestly, like relief that, I knew I'd done the best that I could in that role, and that, a chapter was closing, not of my choosing, but that maybe that was a little bit of a gift.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because it is, you've got the door closing so the window can open, right?
Right.
And sometimes, like you're talking about in your first transition, you can feel the slam of the door really strongly, right? You're like, ooh, the door's slammed, it's not opening. But what your experience has been this second time around is, okay, it's a gentle close because I can already see the window opening, and it's a bit of a gift. It was time. It was something that wasn't necessarily planned or chosen, but there are lots of good things that can come from it. And I think that is a big part of learning how to manage transitions, which it's difficult, right? Because you have to give up what's been and been a really big part of your life for so long to then go and discover what's new, but you don't know what that necessarily is either.
Yeah, and one thing I'd say to that is so beautiful the way you articulated it, is you do also need to open the window yourself, right? The window, it's not like it happens and suddenly you're flooded with offers, no matter who you are. I don't think that's the way it goes. But I think that process of opening windows is something that I would say has been, it's just been tremendously enriching and enjoyable. And I've opened all kinds of windows. whether it was a window on self-development, and I can tell you a little bit about some of the fun things that I've been doing, or a window on relationships and network, and, really just getting out there and having conversations, and not with any agenda, but just thinking, I want to turn my Wi-Fi on, right, to get the signals from the universe about what could be exciting and what could be next. And then the last one I would say that was a window I opened was getting back to health and really looking after myself. And that was particularly important because for the last 4 years in my global role, which I loved every minute of it, and it was a crazy roller coaster, significant business challenges in some areas, fantastic growth in other areas, massive org changes. I mean, we had an IPO. I was on the balcony at the New York Stock Exchange. That is a pinch me moment. Separating Kenvue from J&J, but all those things, I would not change 1 minute of any of it. It was brilliant. And even the way that the chapter closed was brilliant. But in doing that, I was working really, really, really long hours. And, it was challenging. It's very challenging doing a global job from the wrong time zone in Singapore, even though I love Singapore. So getting back to my health was a really, really important part of that. I know you and I talked early in the process of my transition, and you talked about corporate detox, and I definitely needed a bit of that. So that was an important window to open, right? Getting back to getting back to kind of good physical health and sleep and everything.
Yeah, it's so important. So for the people listening, corporate detox is basically just getting off the treadmill. And I think we forget how wired we become. That, because when you're used to just working at pace, and you're used to doing, days and nights, particularly with global roles where, you're servicing time zones, which are in the middle of the night for you, even when you're the president, they're all over somewhere else. And we just get so focused on doing that when we stop, our bodies are still used to going and still used to doing. And it actually takes effort to be able to recognize what's still happening and how to just, do things, but recognize that you have different choices, that you don't have to be full throttle. And it's one of the things I see the most for people who are coming out of really intense roles. And they want to create some space to think about what's the next window. Like, there could be 20 windows that are opening up, but how to not feel that same urgency as they have in their role to just basically lock down the first thing, because you want to give your body a chance to unwind, to detox from the intensity of the pace, to then probably really think about what it is you want. So corporate detox.
Yeah. I love that. It was so relevant to my experience. And I think, if I think about what I did to corporate detox, because that's probably going to be a question that I'm sure you'll get, is how do you do that? What does corporate detox look like? For me, and it wasn't planned, but, sometimes patterns emerge, right? As you get going, is, I was watching a Facebook Live at 3:00 in the afternoon, which you can do when you've transitioned out of your corporate job. Beautiful. And the guy that I was watching, a guy I follow a lot, he was talking about self-development, in moments of change. And I don't know even what context it was. It wasn't a job transition context, but, self-development really is such an enriching thing. And the corporate detox for me, because I knew that I would be, I said to my husband, I'll be bored by Tuesday, I couldn't really trust myself to just do kind of nothing. But I have to tell you that the days absolutely fly by, and I am loving not being scheduled so much. I still have a lot on, but it's so brilliant. But I think the thing that worked really well for me was getting into a bit of self-development so that I could keep my mind active, but really stretching myself to do things that maybe weren't so serious, and they offered an opportunity for doing some of that introspective work.
Yes.
So obviously I can't speak highly enough of your program, which I did, which was absolutely brilliant, because that kind of set the ground. That was honestly probably the first window, you know, and it was a brilliant one to start with, because it really, you know, unapologetically asks the big questions, like, what do I want? I'd had my head down on, you know, on the keyboard for 16 years. Wasn't thinking about what did I want.
Too busy doing.
And you know me, if you think about that uncomfortable growth framework, where you think about, you know, the different quadrants, I'm that top quadrant person who is kind of the just feeling lucky quadrant, right? Which is that you've had the opportunity to get so many experiences, and, you know, just able to go from one thing to the next, from having a very open mindset and a yes, you know, whatever that is, you know, say yes to the opportunities.
Yeah.
So I'd always, and as you know, sometimes frustratingly, that I'd always been hovering in I'll just hang out in the lucky quadrant, and something will present itself. And then when you get a situation happens and you get pushed over into the uncomfortable growth zone, where all of a sudden you're not in control, and you can't just sit there happily going about your thing and waiting for the next, you know, promotion or
the next opportunity.
It's not, someone's not going to just hand it to you. That moment when you have to step back and say, okay, so where do I want to go? What really drives my interest and passion? So for me, starting with the big questions and kind of doing the deep work was so important. But I kind of did that. I have my saying, which I might have stolen from you. It's very possible, which is like one for me and one for my CV. So I did uncomfortable growth, which was for me, the deep work, the questions. And I honestly had to be so disciplined, Ro, because my natural instinct coming out of corporate is just read the book in a day, get it done, get that done, check it off the list. And it was so interesting because the program really forced me to slow down. And, you know, doing the lessons, you know, with a little space in between, really forced me to process a bit and think about stuff and talk about stuff, and like really take it to the next level. But while I was doing that, I also did some other kind of more CV work. Like I went and did an advisory certified chair to be on advisory boards. And I started a coaching course, which is fascinating, totally different group of people. And then this week, I've signed myself up to become a certified Scrum Master, because I do love the Agile model. But it's that idea of, you know, one for me, one for my CV, one that I do just for fun and passion, and then one that I do because, you know, they're good skills to have as a you know, professional. But it all started from the deep work. I can't emphasize enough just the benefit of, even when your instinct says go get a job, that you say, hang on a minute, what kind of job would that be?
And I think it is fascinating, because to the point you were making earlier, if there's a level of fear, right, you know, the door closed more than the window open, then, you know, we feel that we quickly have to secure something, you know, to get back to safety. That's how our biology works, our nervous system works. And so that can also drive speed. And so there's so many things that keep us in speed, whether we're still just used to that pace, or whether we're, you know, unsure and we just want to know that we have what's next. And I think just knowing that happens to everyone is a huge revelation, because, you know, it then gives us permission to go, okay, I feel that drive, but I need to figure out what it is I truly want. I need to ask the big questions, because I am in a moment where I'm not head down, you know, keyboard warrior. I'm actually, you know, I've actually got a chance to think about what I want, what lights me up, how I can even combine my my passions with my work. And, what's going to be the thing that I have the most joy doing in this next chapter, which is always a combination of things, right? We're not one thing. We're not just work. We're not just family. We're not just, whatever that is. We're a combination of things. And so I love that how you articulated that, which was, you're so used to the speed and the focus, and you can read a book super fast and get it done, but being able to just step back and give yourself some space to think it through while you're doing things for enjoyment, while you're still reaching out and doing one for you, one for your CV. I love that.
Yeah. And I can totally relate to that too, because it wasn't that I didn't have moments of fear. Of course, we all do. It's completely natural for anyone going through a massive transition, especially something like your job, which is so much of your identity, actually. And also, your financial security and, for you, for your family, whatever it is. So it's very natural. I think the thing that that really resonated with me, or that I was really conscious of, was being able to recognize that and saying, okay, that's just a very normal response to this situation, to be a little afraid of it. It's great, right? It's good. And then to have the discipline to say, okay, I see you, fear. And I'm just going to observe this for a little minute and think about it, and put a bit of distance between myself and any kind of decision, which I think again was wise advice I got from probably you, which is, you just really have to force yourself to not have the fear in control of the outcome.
Yes.
And but it's recognizing that the fear is there to serve you. The fear is good. Yes. It helps. Yes. It serves you, because you don't want to be destitute on the street and unemployable. That would be bad.
I'm pretty sure you're a long way from that, but anyway.
And look, my husband expects me to keep him in a certain lifestyle, I'll tell you, based on his sneaker obsession, for anyone who knows him. And there's pressures from all over, right? Like pressures from family, pressures from friends, pressures to think that people are looking at you thinking, well, what went wrong? What happened? And actually, one of the things I was reflecting on is that so often, and even now I see it, that people think that what happened was a bad thing. What happened was a fabulous thing. It was a great thing. Because, that idea of closing a chapter and really being grateful and reflecting on everything that you learned, even when it was tough, and everything that you experienced, and then being able to say, okay, let's see what's next. I've found that it just creates tremendous energy. But it is interesting that my own personal view of it, which has just been so positive, actually is a bit different. Other people perceive that maybe it's a negative. That it's not a positive. And I do think in that regard, your own mindset about it is so important, because there is so much fear around things like redundancy and transition and separation, that you have to really be very solid in your own
perspective as to why this is a gift. There's this beautiful quote from Dr. Seuss, which is, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And I love that quote, because it recognizes the closure, and it recognizes that it was amazing and there were lots of elements that you loved, and it's a little bit like grieving, but at the same time, smile because it happened, like it was a gift at the time, and now you're free to go on and pursue something else, which I think again talks to that mindset and the strength of your own mindset. It was a gift. You were, it wasn't right for you, so they were moving the job back for lots of good business reasons. It wasn't personal, and it means you've had this opportunity to be able to do all these other things and to consider what's next, which is the part I'd love to jump into now, which is, okay, so you're kind of detoxing, corporate detoxing, and you're doing all these interesting things and pursuing, plus, one for you, one for the resume.
Mhm.
How have you found that whole period, and what have you learned over the last few, 3 months or so, I think you mentioned, as you've been traveling week by week through that?
Yeah, and this is my first time, Rowie, having a redundancy in my career. I know it happens so often to people. It's so
Mhm.
common now in industry,
Mhm.
to the point where I'm hoping that it loses a lot of its stigma, because
Mhm.
if I think about, I mean, so many of my friends and colleagues and people that I've worked with who are amazing. So many people have been through this experience.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, garden leave is my favorite state.
The gift that keeps on giving.
What a revelation that is. How
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful, that gift of time. And, whether you've got a couple of weeks, or in our case at Singapore, we have like a 3-month notice period, which is the greatest thing ever. So that has afforded me, a little bit of that buffer, which,
Yeah.
I'm very blessed to have had, coming out of a big job, and then creating a moment to decide, kind of what to do next, and be with my kids and my family,
Mhm.
and my proudest achievement of this period is my favorite ever graph, not a business graph. It's the graph of my step chart on working, not working. I have tripled my productivity based on my exercise.
That's so good.
So yeah, so if I go back to kind of week by week, obviously the first week, it was, that first week is a bit of shock,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Shock and just kind of
My life is
working out what to do with
changing.
that knowledge. Yeah.
Uh,
And particularly for me, because, when I found out, I was actually meant to get on a plane an hour later. And because, I was traveling nonstop in my role. So I was meant to get on a plane. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. But then, so that first week was like a hard stop, right? So that takes a bit of adjusting. But already I knew going into it, like I knew as soon as I knew what was going on, I chose my mindset. I chose that this would be something that I approached as a gift, and
mhm.
that it wasn't personal, and that while scary, that I was going to choose my experience of it, which is so important, right? I
Mhm.
didn't let it. So that quote, I heard it. It's in my coaching course. Famous quote that is, it's not, and maybe it's Anthony Robbins, it's not what happens to you, it's what you think about it that matters.
Mhm.
I'm butchering his actual quote, but it's that essence. And that really summarized my approach in that week, which was that I made a choice about how I was going to assimilate this information in a way that was really positive for my mental health,
Yeah.
and for energizing me on what to do next. And also for the impact that it has on people around you, because as a leader, or any of us working in jobs where you've got a big team, or where you're working with
Mhm.
other people, it's not just you, right? That decision or change has an impact on so many other people. And
Mm.
so in that moment too, it was really important for me to be able to articulate that the change was positive, to also
Yeah.
help the other people who are impacted
Yeah.
by that change.
Yeah.
If your boss is leaving, or the person who's been your advocate's leaving, that can be very destabilizing for a lot of
Yeah.
other people. So
Absolutely. And even create
yeah,
ripples of concern for them, thinking, wow, this could be me. This may not in this moment, but this could be me in 6 months or 12 months. And I think you're so right that the way you manage the situation, the way you articulate it, and people can feel energy as well. Like when you're genuinely okay with it and you genuinely see it as a gift, people feel that. And it helps them also, be grateful for the experience that was, and also prepare themselves for the changes that they're going to see. I mean, there's going to be
right.
a new person doing your role.
Exactly. And it's all good, right? We all need change, and change is good for us as humans. Change is good for business. Exactly right. And, when you reflect on all of the moments, where you can choose, I know in the Uncomfortable Growth course, I remember there was an interesting video that you played, maybe you want to talk about it, where it talked about how your emotions, you have more control over your emotions than you think, and that emotions are a little bit programmed. I thought that was so fascinating, because it's true that, if in my circumstance anyway, that being able to ground myself in, what is the truth of this situation, if you kind of look very factually and just say, what, this is what it is. It's not, you don't let fear take control. You program yourself a little bit to say, it's, I am safe. And one of the techniques that I really loved, and I naturally do this a lot too, is kind of say, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen right now? You have to move house, or in my case, I moved back to Australia or whatever. And I'm like, that's all good. I can live with that. Like, it's so as soon as you release the need for it to be going perfect, and just lean into, and be a little more accountable for your emotional mind state. Do you know what I mean? Then it just in my case, it just really helped to de-escalate that fear, particularly in that first week. I'll say the first week was the most important in that regard, because it sets the tone then for how you go on. And then by the second week, I was loving it. I mean, it was amazing.
You had your time, you had all this time. Suddenly you were able to step back and do some personal development, as well as, think about what could be. I mean, I think that the thing that's really fascinating, and as people, as humans, we have so many contradictions, or we have both ends of the spectrum, right? So, there's obviously the fear and the concern and the worry. But once you start to put yourself into that possibility mindset, so energizing, it's so freeing, it's so liberating, because suddenly there's nothing that is controlling you. There's nothing that has to hold you down, and it's always interesting, I think, as people, because often when we're in our jobs, and I speak with a lot of people who may not be happy in their jobs, right? So there's all these things that, it's not working for them, regardless of whether it's number of hours, or whether it's just the role that they don't like, or whether it's, there's a lot of politics or change happening. So there's a lot of rework. There's a whole lot of different factors. But it's interesting that once we're freed from any of those limitations, because it's open, right? So you get to start again, then suddenly we think about, well, what are we missing? Whereas in fact, to what you were saying, if we're able to frame our mindset to think, wow, all those things that were bothering me, I get to totally reset. I get to explore, I get to figure this out. And, and that's so opportune. It's so freeing. It's so exciting that, but it's staying on that side of the emotions, balancing what is normal with some of the fears, to go, yeah, but this is the gift. This is the window opening. And of course, from a biological point, we are more wired for fear, which is why that becomes stronger. It's why it's dominant, but also we're consciously able to choose to focus on the windows opening, or the freedom, or just even the time out, right? You don't even have to have a solution in, the next week. It's like, take some time out. Gardening leave is a beautiful gift. Gives you a buffer. Just take some time out, because it may be a number of years before you get that time again.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. It's exactly my experience. And it is, you do have to force yourself, though. It's not easy. We make it sound kind of easy, but it does take a bit of discipline and stuff to say, I will put space between me and decisions. I won't just jump, and I won't, I won't panic. I'll just be calm in the storm and see what comes up. But another big part for me that I've really enjoyed is reconnecting with people and network. And it's just, I feel like it's, it's one of those things that's always kind of surprising and delighting, just how much time people will give, and just, and I guess you kind of pay it forward and you pay it back as a leader, in all the times that as a leader you invest in the people around you, and then when you need to kind of go out to the collective wisdom and bring some of that back in, that it's easy to tap in. So I've always been really good at keeping in touch with people. And again, because I've moved countries, right? Whenever you're the person moving away, you have to kind of be in charge of keeping in touch, because everybody else is just going on with their life. So I've always been good at that. I've always kept in touch with my old bosses, being one of them. Back in
a million years
ago. Dream team, back in our dream team days. And it's just, I think that's also something that has been also so enriching on the journey. If I think about going back to that kind of week by week, is just getting out and having conversations with people again, and thinking about bigger horizons and opportunities and possibilities and stuff. I think that's been, it's been super enriching. And even just yesterday, I caught up with one of my old bosses, who's a very successful senior executive, wonderful, wonderful leader and wonderful human. And, just in that conversation, I knew I got a text message from her on Saturday morning saying, hey, I'm in Singapore, you around? And I just knew the universe was bringing me this wisdom for a reason, right? I mean, that sounds a bit cheesy, but I really do believe that when you've kind of got the Wi-Fi on, that you get what you need, right? You get the information that you need. And she had a brilliant thought that someone had told her, which was, because I was saying to her, I've got these decisions to make on what I'm going to do, and etc. And she said, again, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines of, don't worry so much about whether you make the right decision, make the decision right. So whatever you choose, then invest your energy in making sure that the outcome is what you want, to the extent that you can control it. And I just loved that, because it takes you away from the past, or thinking about things in a kind of what if it could happen, to putting your energy on the future and making those possibilities happen. And
I love that
in the road.
I love that articulation too, because I do think that you never know if you're making the right decision. You never know, but if you make the decision in the right way, by kind of thinking about what's important to you, what are your values, reflecting on, kind of the whole picture, considering your family as well as your work, all those different intricacies. So if you make a decision in the right way, then regardless of what happens, you're never going to regret it. And I always say too, when you start to lean into this mindset where you own your growth, right? And you can manage transitions, you can always reroute. It's like, if it doesn't work out, because no one knows if something's going to work out the way you thought, or maybe it works out better, right? But if it does work out worse, you can always reroute. You can activate new possibilities, particularly when you understand how that cycle works. And, things, like you said, change all the time. And, sometimes we want to make a decision for ourselves, so say, for example, it wasn't a redundancy. Say, for example, you were just ready to leave your job. Then that's rerouting, right? Like that is, this is a situation that is no longer serving you. So how do you reroute? How do you create a new way forward, a new outcome? And it's not that where you were or what you were doing is necessarily always wrong. It may have been right for a good amount of time, but you change, or it changes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, just having that mindset of you own your growth, you can reroute, you can stay, but you get to make that decision based on what's serving you. And, you know, so I love that articulation. That's just a beautiful way to say, yeah, like don't second guess yourself, do the best you can in the moment. And then it is what it is. And if you don't like it, change it again.
Yeah, I love that reroute. I think that's such a brilliant concept. And it also reminds me something that I'm passionate about that you and I've probably talked about is, you know, I live an alcohol-free lifestyle, and that's a really, really big part of my personal journey and success. And I believe that being alcohol-free is a superpower. And anyone out there that wants to learn more about it, you know, send me a note. I'm super into it. I'm learning. As part of my coaching credential, I'm actually going to study being an alcohol-free coach to support other people in their alcohol-free journey. But it's so interesting because the parallel to that reroute thing is, you know, the guy that I follow, a guy called Andy Ramage, who's a pretty well-known influencer in the UK in the alcohol-free space. He talks about how the journey to give up alcohol for a lot of people is many, many years, right? Like usually, and people have, he calls them blips, or, you know, people have little blips, right? There's blips, there's things where you're going, well, that didn't work out. And I feel like that concept, as you think about, you know, navigating careers, is a bit like that, you know, like sometimes you will be in a situation where you're like, this is not quite it. Right. And the same thing is that you can reroute, you can make a different choice. And, you know, sometimes you just have to kind of follow the path that gets you there. And it might have a few speed bumps, but you need to kind of be in charge of the end outcome, you know, and then how you get there. But know that there'll be setbacks, right? Know that it won't be perfect. It's never is. It never is. And I guess also, as I look at, you know, when you get out of working in a certain company, and I've been so privileged and blessed, right? Working for Johnson & Johnson for most of my career, and P&G before that with you, and, you know, incredible companies, that you come out of it and, you know, every company's got its quirks, its goods, its bads, it's, you know, it's a hot mess somewhere in every company, right? And just that idea that you can reroute, and that, you know, there are going to be blips and speed bumps and challenges, and that's okay, and that you can handle it. It's so powerful. And I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit with that when we're heads down, keyboard warrior. So I couldn't encourage people more that, you know, it's such an important thing to just create some space to take a look outside, to put your head up. That's what I really felt. Put your head up, have a look, like what is it that you want?
And also, it's okay to make completely different choices. You know, I was talking to a client the other week, and we were just talking about how often we make assumptions around what we can choose. So, for example, you know, she was talking about how, you know, like, you know, if she was to leave her job, then they'd have to rethink financial situation, right? And so what could that look like? And she's like, oh, I just can't. And I'm like, well, you can, but you just may not like it, right? So, you know, I'm like, okay, we all know how to add up. You know, if that's the amount, that's the amount. But if you have a lower amount or a higher amount, you can have different choices. It's just that we think we can't because we're stuck doing, you know, we're stuck with the choices we've made before. And she's like, you know, she said to me, she goes, you're so right. She's like, you know what? I actually don't need this lifestyle. We just do these things because we started to. And so, you know, I'm living a lifestyle that actually it's not my priorities. So yeah, I could just stop XYZ, and then suddenly I have very different choices. So I think that's the other thing that, you know, we may have made choices that help us to be in this space, but we can change all those choices. We don't necessarily have to stay in the space. And I think that that's an important part, because we're all capable of great change. We're all capable of second, third, fourth careers. I mean, our kids are going to probably have 9 different careers they're currently estimating. So, you know, they can look completely different. And I think that's also one of the joys of popping your head up, like you say, getting out of our bubble or connecting with people who aren't necessarily in our core social connections. Finding people who are completely outside of that. Like I've experienced that through thought leaders, which I'm part of as a group, and now through my meditation group. So people from completely different backgrounds. And I'm like, that's a real choice. It's not one that would come to my mind, because it's not the choices of most of the people I hang out with. But it's a real choice. And wow, like they look really happy.
Yeah. It's so powerful, Ro. I agree with you there so much. And I remember I had a really meaningful moment with a colleague of mine. This was like 2018. And he asked me a hard question, you know, when people have those, you know, your hard questions. And he was like, well, you know, because he must have said we were at a work event, and he said, you know, what's happening next for you, and blah, blah, you know, the normal conversation that you have with people at work. And he's he's got a little bit of hippie tendencies, I would say. He's a bit of a, you know, slightly more spiritually connected kind of human. And he was like, but like, and like when I was saying, oh, you know, I don't know what I'm doing next and blah, blah. And he said, but like, what's your priority? Like, what is it that you are choosing? And I was like, it was such a deep question. I'm like, I have no idea. And so that day, that night, I thought, no, I really need to know the answer to that. That should be something I know about myself, shouldn't it? But because we've got our heads down so often, we don't even know the answer. And I remember that so vividly, because then I went home being very diligent as I am, and I did my own homework, and I went, oh, okay. And it occurred to me at that time that, you know, I think I was talking about getting promoted or whatever it was, the usual. I was like, you know what? Getting promoted is the least priority in my life right now. You know, like my kids are happy at school. My husband's doing great in his career. We have a, you know, very happy, low drama life, et cetera, et cetera. And by just taking that 1 minute to kind of stop and immerse myself in the bigger picture, it then occurred to me that actually that's not my priority at all. And I bring it back to that comparisonitis that you talk about, or keeping up with the Joneses. Like, so often it's other people's choices that direct us in those things that become automatic pilot. And it's just so meaningful when you can take a tiny little step back and say, well, what really is it that matters to me? And then when you going back to that rerouting and owning your own growth, you kind of have to know that fundamental question. Otherwise, you're just going to do the thing that people expect you to do, or
that you see all around you. It's just like, this is kind of the path that you see, and that's fine if you choose that path. There's nothing wrong with it. But is it right for you? And that's the right, that's the question to ask. Is that the right choice for you now?
Yeah. And does it give you joy, right? We only have one life. And I feel like, you know, this experience has really reinforced that to me, that and I had an amazing job, and I worked with incredible people for the last 16 years, and, you know, so blessed in that regard. But it transitions are a gift, because it does force you a little bit to step back and say, you know, if I do only have one shot at this, what really brings me joy, what really energizes me, and to be in the driver's seat of your growth, even if sometimes you've got to be forced into the driver's seat, right? As I was. But it is a gift, and I really hope coming through this experience that I can, you know, continue to share some of that wisdom with others of having had that experience, and also just it'll just change my perspective on my own growth. You know, I think I will be able to now avoid a bit of the automatic pilot. Hopefully you can keep me accountable to that, to see if I do it. But I do think it's such a gift, and I would so strongly recommend to anyone, you know, if they're considering a change, to you know, ask themselves the hard questions, put a bit of a framework around it, because it's just so powerful for you know, grounding yourself in what matters, and you know,
and making
our time wisely
for you, making the best choices for you, because we're all different, we're all individuals, we're all at different stages, you know, we all have different crossroads. So at the end of the day, the only person who can answer the hard questions are you.
Right.
So
and everybody's answers will be different, and
they will. And that's beautiful.
What makes us all interesting. Yeah,
exactly. Well, I've got a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
First one. What are 3 things you've learned about yourself in recent years?
That I have the capacity to bring out a lot of great things in other people, that loyalty is important to me, and that, you know, generosity is my happiest state.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that gave me goosebumps. What is a current fear, a current inspiration, and a current challenge for you at the moment?
Oh, so current fear, I mean, getting a new job, starting somewhere new, first day fears is what I'm going to say. Always had a first day fear. I don't know if other people do, but I definitely do. What was the other one? Current challenge?
A challenge and an inspiration.
Oh, a challenge. What's a challenge? I feel, you know, I am so often, you know, good or bad, I rush straight into things. And then, you know, the great quotes that say you get the courage after you do it. That's me. I don't have a current challenge. So I'm sorry, I have no answer for that one. I just rush off and do things. And an inspiration, just always inspired by my husband, by my kids. You know, my son just graduated, just took incredible stamina to get through his IB, and, you know, hard work is what inspires me when I see that. It's brilliant.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Hard work is a talent, is what I say to my kids. So that's how we succeed.
And a discipline, right? Like I was actually talking to someone else about the difference between motivation and discipline. I was talking to my mum. No, because she always says, oh, I hate doing my exercises for her sore knee, and she's got a bad shoulder, and she's like, I hate doing my exercises. And then she was talking about how but she can be very motivated. I'm like, yes, Mum, you are very motivated, but you're not very disciplined. So you're very motivated to go to the, you know, the physio, and very motivated to buy the bands and all the little bits. But when it comes to actually doing the discipline, not so much. So we were laughing about that.
I love that difference. It's hilarious.
It is. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a joy to have you on this program. And I know so many people are going to take so much insight and permission for themselves as they're thinking about their next transition. So thank you, Leish.
Thanks, Ro. And so here's to uncomfortable growth, my next chapter. Maybe I'll report back in a few months on how the transition is panning out.
Absolutely. Okay. Thanks, Ellesha.
Thanks.
If you are inspired but thinking, I can't do that, then you are so wrong. Anyone can learn the art of uncomfortable growth with the help of my flagship program, Uncomfortable Growth, Own Your Reinvention. In this, you will learn to navigate your own internal contradictions to finally unlock the courage and commitment to live a deeply meaningful life by design and on your terms. Uncomfortable growth is about the struggle and joy in discovering who you are, what you truly want, and how to make it happen. If this is something you are ready for, then find out more at www.rowenamillward.com. What have you got to lose, or more importantly, gain?